Welcome. Good afternoon. We are excited to host our first ever virtual PreMed series in May. We're grateful that you took time out of your schedule to take part in this event to learn more about the University of Texas Medical Branch School of Medicine. We had an overwhelming response to our invitation and are excited to share in this experience with you over the next 4 weeks. Today's event will feature an introduction to our wonderful team in the Office of Admissions and Recruitment, followed by an insight into our admissions process, and then a discussion on how you can become a competitive applicant for UTMB. Our staff will be available to answer questions at the end of the presentation. However, you are welcome to also send your questions to us via the Q&A section or in the chat box. So to get started with our introductions, I'll introduce myself. My name is Tanya Neely, and I direct our student recruitment efforts. I've been with UTMB for almost 20 years now, and I'm excited to be here today.
Hi, my name is Tria Smith. I'm a recruiter coordinator for UTMB. I've been with UTMB for 12 years in July. I come from California, but I've been enjoying this hot, humid weather that Galveston gives us every year for the last 12 years.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Teresa Silva. I am the Director of Admissions. I have been with UTMB for almost 32 years, and I'm eagerly awaiting all of your questions.
Hello, Tammy Bird, also admissions coordinator. Been with UTMB for 10 years, and glad you all are joining us today.
Hi, I'm Rita Capato, and I work part-time for the office. I work about half the year with admissions and the other half with recruiting and our summer programs.
And I'm Richard Carroll. I'm the Assistant Dean for Medical School Admissions and Recruitment at UTMB. And what I hope to accomplish this afternoon is to give you some idea of my view of what it takes to be a competitive applicant. And I'm going to try to share my screen.
Dr. Carroll, your camera is not on, so we cannot see who you are.
Oh, I can see mine, but I can't see any of you guys.
Interesting.
It's on.
Well, maybe if you share your screen, things will change.
Okay. Let's see if I can share. Did that work?
It's just a black screen.
Okay, let me move this over here. How about now?
Nothing's changed. Oh, there's your camera's on.
And can you see the screen?
I can only see Richard Carroll has started sharing screen.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if anybody else, can anybody else see the screen? So it looks like people are saying no.
Okay, so it shows up on mine. Let's see.
How about I share my screen?
Okay. Work. Can you guys see it now, Latanya? Yeah. Okay, then I'll just go with you for changing the slides. Okay.
Can you make sure you stop sharing your screen?
You want me to stop it?
Stop sharing your screen so Tanya can share hers.
Okay. This is my desktop. Okay, that better?
Yes.
Okay. Well, again, welcome to the UTMB School of Medicine Pre-Med Conference for May 7th. As I said, I hope today to talk to you a little bit about what I think and what my experience tells me you need to be competitive as an applicant. I've been doing the admissions process in one position or another for 33 years at UTMB. So I have a pretty good idea of what it takes at UTMB. There are 12 schools in TMD SES, and each one of them will have a slightly different approach. And if I can go to the next slide, you'll see that the UTMB Medical School admissions process. And we do a preliminary screen in the admissions office. If your GPA is less than 3.0 or your MCAT is less than 500, you are not very competitive with the over 5,000 applicants we get. And you may not be forwarded to the whole committee screeners that are the next step. The admissions committee screen for interview determines who will be interviewed. And as an applicant, that is your goal. If you don't get an interview, you can't be accepted.
Excuse me, Dr. Carroll, I do apologize to interrupt. I don't see a screen. Do you want to try sharing your screen again?
Okay, I'll do that.
I don't know if LaTonya's shared screen, the option came up. So if you don't mind sharing your screen again.
I do not mind.
Oh, it looks like Lee's just came through.
Oh, now I'm viewing LaTonya's screen.
Right, okay, so it looks like it was just on a delay. Sorry about that.
Okay. So the second step in our admissions process is committee screening for interview. And as I said, that's your goal. Following the interview, we have the admissions committee ranking our students. And they're going to be ranked recruit, accept, or reject. And that determines who will get the early interview offers. And those early admissions offers start going out in October 15th. Then we have a final interview ranking that we submit to TMD SAS for the match. And if you pick us number one and we pick you at the top of our list, you will be in our class or potentially in our class. Now, the factors we consider in the next slide include the academic profile, the MCAT, a Casper score, test score, TMD SAS application, our secondary application, letters of evaluation, personal essays, and interviews. Now, since the initial screen by the committee members looks at the whole application, a very important part of that to get their attention is the academic profile. And although there's a lot more to each applicant and to the application they submitted than just numbers, it's the numbers that initially get the attention of all of the screeners, no matter what school you go to. And some schools will actually set limits and not review any applications that are below those limits. As I said, if you're below 500 and MCAT and below a 3.0, your chances are not good. It doesn't mean they're impossible, but in the absence of some excellent graduate work, your chances are not very good. So when we look at the academic profile, we look at your overall coursework, your overall GPA, your grades by semester, your science GPA, and any post-bac or graduate degree GPA that you may have on the profile. And all of those together will help determine whether we think you can get through the medical school curriculum. And that's why the numbers are so important. If your numbers are low, we have concern that you could not make it through the medical school curriculum. Also, you're in competition for over 5,000 other applicants. And as you can imagine, if you're at 3.0, you probably have 4,500 applicants that have higher GPAs than you do. So you're not going to be as competitive, at least in terms of numbers. As I said, there are other things, and those other things can move you up in terms of where you might be on the ranking list for the screeners. Also, the MCAT. The mean MCAT for the pool is around 507, 508. So if you're at the middle of, if you're average, that means you've got 2,500 people that have better scores than you do. And we interview 1,100 and something. Other schools don't interview that many. And so to be competitive, you really need to be at that, at least at that mean, if not above. But again, it depends on what else the screeners see in your application, whether or not they're going to grant you an interview. The other number that we look at is the Casper score. Now, the Casper scores, for those of you who've taken the test, is a population distribution score. So the mean score on the Casper is 0. A -1 would be 1 standard deviation below the mean score, and +1 would be 1 standard deviation above. So if you're below, say, a -2, you're probably not going to be as competitive as you would be if you were at. Those numbers are used in determining by pretty much every school who uses Casper. Those will help determine whether or not you're invited for an interview. If we move on to the next slide, you'll see the what the mean scores are for the students in our current class. And as you see, we had 5,122 applications in the last admission cycle. Our class was composed of 52% women, 48% men, with an average age of 23, but a range of 20 to 44. So if you're an applicant that's been working for a while, that does not mean you're not going to be competitive, because age is not a factor when we're looking at applications. We interviewed, as I said, 1,136 people out of our 5,122. So roughly a quarter or so of the people we give interviews to. Our average GPA was 3.88, and our average MCAT was 508. But again, there's a broad range around these. Our kind of the lower end of our GPA was around 3.3. The low end of our average MCAT was about 502. So there is a range around this. So if you're not at those means, that does not mean you might not be competitive for an interview. In our entering class, we also have 72 undergraduate schools represented. And as you can see, our ethnic background is very diverse. 80% of our applicants have to come from Texas, and the most we can accept from non-residents is 20% of the class, or 10% of the class, I'm sorry, which would be 23 students. So if you're an out-of-state applicant, you're competing for many fewer spots than if you're a Texas resident. The next slide. So I mentioned all these numbers, and numbers are important. That's what initially gets the attention of admissions administrative people and the committees. But there are other things. And what are those other things? And there are many, many of them, and they're listed on this slide. Among, I think, one of the more central ones is a realistic understanding of what medicine's all about, and motivation to achieve the goal of becoming a physician. Maturity, integrity, intellectual curiosity, community involvement is also very important. So we are looking basically for a very well-rounded individual. And all of these things go into making up the kind of person that we're looking for when we're looking at an applicant. In the next slide, you see a little bit about the Casper test. It's assesses non-cognitive skills and interpersonal characteristics that we think are important in our applicants. If you're familiar with it, that's great. If you have gone to the website at Altus Assessments, or probably also the Take Casper website, you've seen that they have some information about the shortened MCAT. And they also have a sample test and sample questions for the shortened MCAT. So I would urge each of you to go to that website quickly. It's open for exam. So if you are applying this cycle, I would urge you to take that exam as soon as you can, because that's part of a complete application. We won't consider people who do not have a Casper score. So it's important to get that in early, just as it is important to get in your whole complete application to TMD SES, so we can begin reviewing everything in your application. Non-cognitive factors, but we have to be convinced that you can successfully complete our curriculum if we're going to give you an interview. And everybody we interview, we consider have that ability to succeed in medical school. In the next slide, just shows you where we get our applications, and it's from the Texas Medical and Dental School Application Service. It includes basically it's your life story. It includes academic and non-academic recognitions as non-cognitive or non-number achievements, any employment, leadership experiences, research activities, very important healthcare activities, community service, volunteer, any leisure activities you have. It asks you to identify top 3 meaningful activities. And these are important for you to think seriously about when you're writing these. Pick them carefully out of the material that you've discussed in your personal statements. And then we're interested in your planned activities between October and August of 2021. In terms of the Casper exam, they also have some practice questions and practice scenarios you can look at. So go through all of those carefully before you take that exam. This year is the first year we are requiring a secondary application. I think at least 10 of the 12 schools have a secondary application. So it will be not only our secondary that you'll be filling out. And we will send you a email notification that we've received your complete application and ask you to complete the secondary before we do a complete review of your application. Unfortunately, the fee for this is $70. So it costs you some more money on top of the, I think, the TMD SAS, but that's true of all the schools that require secondaries. The next slide, we talk a little bit more about the other things that we're going to look at in your application. And personal statements, very important. We want to know as much about you as a person as we can possibly find out. So it's good in your personal statement to explain your motivation for seeking a medical career, including the value of your experience that have brought you to that conclusion. and they can be a wide ranging. It can be your volunteer experiences. It can be family experiences, a lot of different things, but make sure that it kind of focuses on what brought you to the decision of seeking a medical career. In your personal characteristics essay, you want to describe your personal characteristics that would add to the educational experiences of others. That's why we're looking for a well-rounded student body. And you know, we have lawyers, we have nurses, EMTs, people who have scribed, lots of people who have scribed. So we want that to bring that to our curriculum and to our small groups, because a lot of our education is done in groups of 9 or 10 students. And the life experience you bring to that group while you're discussing a medical case can add significantly to the learning of the whole group. Then there's an optional essay that you can discuss any unique circumstances. I presume this year a lot of the unique experiences will center around how COVID has influenced your ability to carry out all of the things that you wanted to do to get ready for medical school. In the next slide, you see that there are 3 letters of recommendation and an optional letter that you can submit to support your application. We like those 3 letters to be from health profession committees or people who know you well. Just a general letter that says, yes, you're a very fine student and you got an A in my class isn't necessarily a strong letter. So pick people that really know and understand you as best you can, and ask them, can you give me an excellent letter of recommendation? If they hesitate, maybe you should consider trying to find somebody else to provide the letter. And professors can be, because many of you, I'm sure, have gone to office hours for your professors and they've gotten to know you. So those kinds of letters from a professor can be very valuable for the admissions committee when they're making their decisions. The next slide, it outlines the way we interview at UTMB. It's August through January. They have been conducted on Fridays with 50 to 60 applicants, obviously with the constraints on groups. We may not be able to carry that out this year. And they have been 2 traditional interviews with UTMB faculty members. We may start in August, just as we have in the past, but the program and the interviews may be online through Zoom or some other virtual program. So we're still figuring that out, but we will certainly let you know when we invite you for an interview how that will be conducted. And finally, I think the applications opened May 1st. When I looked this morning, there were almost 4,000 applications already begun, and at least 200 that have been submitted. So people are at least getting started early. And that's something we always urge people to do. The interview season it will begin in August. We're not totally sure about the date, but probably at least by August 21st, and may go into January. Our early acceptances will begin October 15th. The application deadline has been changed to the 30th of October from the 1st. The deadline for test scores and letters, November 15th. Match preference submissions, the 19th of February, and the match on March 5th. Now, I know that Prometrics is in a mess, and that they probably already canceled many of your applications for a test date. And even if you have a test date, you may show up and the center is not open. So all of the schools in TMDSES have agreed not only to accept and begin review of applications before we get the latest MCAT, but also we're taking pass-fail, because many institutions have offered pass-fail options for the classes that began in the spring of this year. And also, I think we're probably going to accept them through summer one. So don't be concerned about that. Just get your MCAT done as soon as you possibly can. And we realize that this is a really disturbing thing to happen to you when you're at the point where you're trying to apply for medical school and put your best foot forward. All of the TMD SAS schools are aware of this, and will make some accommodations to allow you to get your scores in. How do you prepare for success in a medical school application? Well, you want to develop personal skills, and these include study skills, which most all of you have, because your academic performance has been exceptional. For our curriculum and many others, time management is a must. Your undergraduates, you may have been used to sort of putting things off and then cramming the last minute. And then probably 2 days later, you've forgotten a lot of the stuff that you studied before. Particularly in our curriculum, we give you a significant amount of time off, either in the mornings or afternoons, 2 days a week. So you have to really be able to manage your time and not just blow off that free time. You need to schedule and run a schedule. So we encourage you to start developing those kinds of skills earlier. Communications is a must for a physician, and that's part of what our interview is about. Can you talk to people? Can you communicate? And so that's an extremely important thing for you to work on, and you can work on it in many ways, through your volunteer efforts, through your community experiences, your college med committees and things like that. So develop that communication skills and interpersonal skills, because we may ask you how you handle if you were the chair of a committee in your fraternity or sorority and you had to deal with the people in that committee that might not have always agreed with you. How did you handle that? Because you're going to have to deal with a lot of different kinds of people, and interpersonal skills are a must to be the best physician you can be. Personal experiences, we like to see a lot of clinical research, community service, and leadership activities. Depending on your situation, you may have more difficulty doing some of these than some others might have. So if you're in a very rural setting, volunteering, clinical experiences may be tough to get. And we realize that. We look at where you come from, what your resources are. And we understand that not everybody can do all of these things to the extent that some very, inner city people that go to large schools have lots of economic ability can do. So we look at that. And your personal attributes, your maturity, compassion, how you can adapt to difficulties. We've all had to adapt to difficulties with the current pandemic. So those kinds of things are also important, and we look at those very seriously when we're doing the holistic review of your application. And finally, your allies are your pre-med advisors. Make use of these people. It's clear that some of our applicants probably didn't seek advice from their medical advisors, or they might not have been applying. If they had a 1.75 science GPA and have never gotten above a C in a science course, their medical advisors probably would have advised them that they might not want to apply to medical school. But we see those. So make those medical advisors your friends and use their advice. Pre-medical organizations are very important because they generally have functions that make you more acquainted, give you a better working knowledge of medicine and the people that have careers in medicine. So take advantage of those. And admissions officers, as you probably know or can imagine, we get many communications from the people that apply to us and the people who are thinking about applying to us. And we do the best we can to respond to all of those. Now it's a little more difficult since all of us are working in virtual space, not in our offices, but we still do the best we can and try to get answers to your questions as quickly as possible. And in our case, our student ambassadors are really our frontline people for recruiting students. It's to go make a decision about what medical school you want to go to. You really need to know if you're a good fit for that medical school, and everyone has a little bit different personality. So our ambassadors and communicating with them can give you a good idea of whether UTMB is the kind of institution you'd like to spend a grueling 4 years in medical school. And here is our website. If a lot of your questions can be answered by going to that website, and we would encourage you to do that also for answers to some of the questions you have. And certainly thank you for your attention and best wishes in achieving the career goals that you have. Probably several of you are still on waiting lists, and this is a very busy time in admissions, making new offers to students who hadn't been made offers to previously. And it's a time that all the schools take applicants from other schools and make openings available. So don't give up if you're on one of those wait lists, but if you're not, we would look forward to reviewing your application in the coming cycle. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Carroll. We are going to actually now try to answer some of your questions. And I'd like to go over to the Q&A section to get some of those questions that you might have. So let's see if we can see those. Okay, so here's one question, Dr. Carroll. If front desk clinic volunteering and hospice volunteering considered clinical? I'm sorry.
I think definitely clinic volunteering, front desk, anything that introduces you to what you're going to be involved in as a physician, I think can be an important experience, and perhaps particularly hospice volunteering, because those are not well individuals generally. They're coming to the end perhaps of life, and yes, I consider them volunteering. You're going to be dealing with those kinds of people in your practices, and I certainly think they're a valuable experience. And it also helps you with those interpersonal skills and communication skills, because you're going to have to deal with these people.
Dr. Carroll, I have a student in the Q&A section.
Okay.
If reapplying, is it okay to submit the same personal statement and the 2 optional essays, or would you suggest changing them a bit, or writing new ones?
I think they should be updated, because if a year has passed, you have volunteered and you've done other things, there should be something during that 1 year experience would add to your personal statement. So I would not use exactly the same one. Some people read it and see what they think, see if they have suggestions. And I would try to make it a little bit different, because I know some of the reviewers are going to go back and look to see if it's the same letter. I also know that many schools won't even look at a letter if it's more than a year and a half old. So you certainly couldn't use it for 2 cycles. You might get by with using it, a letter for 2 cycles. But they also look at personal statements, and I think they would like to see something in there about what's happened in the year between your last application and your current one.
We have another question. How heavily are postgraduate studies considered when considering potential students for interview opportunities?
It can be a make or breaker. If you had a mediocre GPA as an undergraduate, and you take say a graduate program, a 1-year medical science program at an institution where you're taking medical school courses and you're taking the type of exam that you're going to be taking through medical school, it could get you an interview. Particularly if you get a 4.0 in those programs, it can make the difference. But you need to do well. If you do the same as you did as an undergraduate and you didn't do exceptionally well there, it's your GPA any, because it's 39 hours and you probably already have 130, 140 as an undergraduate. So it's not going to really improve your GPA, but it can convince admissions officers that you can succeed in a medical school curriculum.
There's another question, Dr. Carroll. or Teresa, you're more than welcome to answer also. It says, what is UTMB's policy of AP credits? I have 8 credits of biology from AP. I will and want to take more advanced biology classes. I also have 4 credits of general chemistry. I take general chemistry this summer, organics next year, and 1 advanced chemistry. Do these fulfill requirements? So it looks like it's 8 credits of biology from AP, and then it looks like 4 credits from general chemistry. Are those accepted to fulfill requirements?
We definitely will accept the AP credit. With AP credit, you need to realize that those have to be posted on a transcript and they must be listed individually. But yes, we will accept those and there is no limit.
Hold on, I'm sorry, just looking through questions to make sure that they're not duplicates so we can ask different questions. So here is something, I'm not sure if we've discussed this one. It's about recommendation letters. Could I have some advice on my letters of recommendation, please? For my final letter writer, I'm debating if I should ask an individual who knows me very well, involved in a school ambassador program and used to be involved in scholarship programs. But he's not in the sciences. He did not oversee any academic coursework I did. The other option is a second science professor who I believe could write a strong letter but does not know me as well or as long as the other non-science individual. 2 letters are from summer research mentors and 1 is from a science professor, current PI.
Well, those could be the first 3, and you could use the non-science person as the optional, because if they know you well, they know the kind of person you are, and that's one of the things that the admissions committee really wants to know. How do you deal with people? And so I would think that might be the best route to take. use the the professors, and then maybe the optional letter, the fourth optional letter as your non-science person. I have one from an applicant that I see that is asking about if you have had to leave school because of failing grades, and you've since come back and you're doing very well. The problem, as they point out, if you're retaking courses, TMD SAS averages the 2 course grades. So if you had a very poor grade, if you had say you had a C and you get an A, you're going to wind up with a B. And a 3.0 is not a great competitive GPA for medical school, but the committees will look at how you did in those courses. They can see the individual courses, not just the GPA, because they can look at the transcripts. They're there at the end of the application and see how you did, and that may change their opinion. So I wouldn't necessarily abandon their goal if you did really well when you came back to school.
So we have another question. Is it better to have several different types of activities or many years of experience in 1 or 2 major activities?
The committees, based on my experience, they really look at both. If you have been committed to one and you do it every year and get lots of experience there, that shows a commitment to volunteering. Or it's good to have different types, but they do look at, if you just skip around, you did 3 hours here, 4 hours there, 5 hours there. I think the committed experience might carry more weight. LaTanya, you've had some experience there. What would you think about that?
Well, definitely. I think what's going to be important is, giving us an idea of where your passions lie. So, we can get an idea, what you're passionate about based on how much time you've committed to participating in certain activities. So we have another question. Is it okay for most of my clinical experience to have been paid experience rather than volunteer hours?
I mean, I think that's fine. There are a lot of paid scribes, and it gives you really good insight into what a medical career is about. And that's one of the things that we're looking for. Do you understand what medicine is about, or are you a very naive person who thinks, oh, I'm just going to go in, breeze through medical school and go out and make lots of money and not have to worry about anything? When you see it up close at hand, whether it's paid or it's volunteer, I think it's valuable experience, and it's judged that way by admissions administrators. Do you have anything to add to that? Anybody? How do we get connected to student ambassadors?
Yeah, I was getting ready to ask that question, or at least present that question out there. And so we have, actually, if you would like, at the end of our series, we're going to have a Q&A with our student ambassadors, and they'll be on board to answer all of your questions. But we do have a email address that we can send out to you all so that you can ask them questions that way as well.
Yeah, I see a question about I have a less than a 3.0 GPA but a high MCAT. Would my application still be considered? There are a lot of, I think almost every school look at them individually. The GPA tells us something about how you performed at the undergraduate. The MCAT tells us, can you take this kind of test, and what's your basic science knowledge? And both of those skills are necessary for medical school, because pretty much every exam you're going to take once you hit medical school is going to be similar to the MCAT style. It's going to be timed. There's going to be lots of stress involved. And if you can't take that kind of exam, then that could be a problem. Other schools, and we're considering it, multiply your GPA times your MCAT score. And if you're above a certain threshold, whatever that may be, say 1600, which would be 3.25 times a 502, I think. Then they would consider your application. And I have seen applications even from people, some schools claim that their average MCAT's 517. I've seen some of those schools accept students and interview students who have a 3.0 and say a 520 MCAT, because sometimes the GPA is lower because of the school you went to or the program you were in. Biomedical engineering is a tough row to hoe, and you may have a slightly lower GPA if you're in that program, because it's no matter what school you go to, that program is very difficult. Certain schools are known for their difficulty, say MIT, Berkeley, some schools, and we look at the GPA, where you went to school, and all of your other experiences. So it's not just, excuse me, it's not just a number look.
So there's another question about the JAMP program. So for the JAMP program, how different is the application process? Also, how does the school matching work? And so with the program, that's the beauty of that program being up under TMD SAS. The application is the same. Most of the time for your, once you actually apply to medical school, the information that you put into that application will then be uploaded to your TMD SAS application. As far as the school matching works, there's an algorithm that they do, and so the number of students that go to each school is dependent upon the class size of each of the schools. So like say for instance with UTMB, we're a class size of 230 students. So we're gonna get a large percentage of the applicants in the pool that year. And if you have a smaller class, you're gonna get a smaller number of JAMP students that might match.
A question I had the other day was from a student who'd been out of school for 10 years and hadn't done all that well 10 years ago in school. And they were asking about retaking prerequisites. And there is a program that you should explore if it's been that long since you've been in college, and it's called the Fresh Start program. And I don't know all of the details, but I know you basically start over on your GPA and you take the prereqs. And if you do very well there, no one's very concerned about your work long ago. So I don't know if Lee or Tria, you know more about that program or not. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what program it was. I do apologize. I was reading the comments. Oh, I don't know. I'm not familiar.
Yeah. This person had explored that program, but I don't know where you find it, whether it's in the UT system or exactly where you get it, but it's out there if you've been out of school for 10 years or so. In terms of your aid package, yeah, Teresa.
There's a question. Teresa, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about academic fresh start, if that's what he was saying. It was a little hard.
Yeah.
So it wipes away everything from 10 years past. So basically what it is you're starting absolutely over. So you can't pick and choose which courses you want to keep or not keep. It's kind of like an all or nothing program. So if you choose to go this route, it wipes everything clean away, and you would just pretty much like it says, you get a fresh start. And you just have to apply through TMDSES, and you let them know you want to use that capability.
And there's a question about aid package. Generally, I think that's specific to the schools. You generally, I think, have to fill out a FAFSA, and each school judges your aid based on the scholarship application and your financial need at the school. Anybody else have comments about that?
Yeah, definitely. Each school's tuition is different. So what I will say is that almost all students do get the financial aid package, and there's different levels based on what your needs are. If you're someone that has a child and needs childcare, you can actually apply for a higher level of financial aid as well. So you go in, and our financial aid office will work with you depending on what your needs are. But almost all of our students receive financial aid.
So we have a question. Oh, I think it just moved. I'm sorry. It just moved. 1 second. I got to find it. It was regarding the MCAT. A student asked how late can they take the MCAT this cycle, and will they be invited for an interview before they receive their MCAT scores?
I think generally many of the schools, there's a lot of discussion about whether schools will invite before an MCAT. Some of them are considering it. Others want the MCAT before they're going to invite. But I think the deadline for final test scores is it in October or November, Teresa? Do you remember?
I believe that got changed to November 15th.
Okay. So as long as they're in before then, there will be schools interviewing, some of them into February, I think.
Yeah, and then also the MCAT testing center has added several additional testing dates, with 3 and 4 tests being administered per date. So while most of you are worried that we've missed out on some test dates, they have incorporated some of those additional test dates for you. And we do understand that that's a big concern. And so even the matching process has moved later into next year as well.
Yeah, and they've shortened the test to 5.5 hours from 8. Is that correct? So it is a shorter exam, but the scoring is the same.
Yeah.
Which means fewer questions and still the same score. So how you do, may change a little bit. In terms of the personal statement, there's a question, which is more accurate to talk about a life-changing experience, traumatic, intense, or experience that shaped the applicant to want to become a physician. Sometimes those are both the same. Sometimes they're not. And they think there's enough in the 3 essays you can write. I think there's enough space that you can address each of those. And I think it would be fine to do that. Is a letter from a physician required? No. Is it better to submit a letter from a physician? Maybe as the optional letter. I don't think that for the first 3. Tanya, you have a thought on that, or anybody else?
Well, my thought is that you would need to have someone who can speak well about your abilities, someone who knows you well academically, who can speak to your professional nature, who can talk about how well you communicate with individuals. So, having a letter from a physician could be a great thing if you've spent quite a bit of time with that person, but really and truly, you'll need to look for people who know you very well.
Yeah, we have one on a post-bac student who wants to know if their GPAs will be considered separately. Well, we can see them separately. And it really will just depend on the reviewer about what they put more weight on. And certainly if you have a 4.0 and you're taking upper level science courses as a post-bac, and you had a bad semester or two in your freshman year, they're going to put some significant weight on that post-bac GPA. So, you know, it's not unusual. And unfortunately, one bad semester, one bad year can put you into the less competitive group as far as the applicant numbers are concerned in terms of GPA. So, yes, they are considered separately. They will be lumped into your overall GPA though. But generally, the problem is generally post-bac courses, there aren't that many hours. And so it doesn't affect your overall all that much.
Dr. Carroll, here's the question. Oh, Tree, I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. We're both, I'm sorry. But what do you believe are some of the biggest or most common mistakes applicants make when preparing to apply to medical school?
Well, probably the most common one is not starting out with that goal in mind and not doing well as a freshman in college. But in terms of things like personal statement, you want to not just talk about things that happen to you along the way. You want to focus on things that occurred that influence your decision to become a physician, or that have influenced how you think about what a physician does, and not so much on some things that really aren't related to the medical field or your career goals as in the medical field. LaTanya, you've seen a lot of these, and so has Teresa. What do you guys think?
I'm sorry, Dr. Carroll, I'm answering questions online, so I missed it.
Oh, okay. LaTanya, do you have a thought on that? What's important in that, or what the biggest mistakes are?
Biggest mistakes for your application?
Yeah. As an
applicant. So, you know, I think it's important that you really try to highlight those things that make you stand out, that, you know, things that you are passionate about. I continue to, you know, iterate that when I speak to students, because that is where you have been able to share with someone, you know, why you want to help people, and, you know, really give us an idea of who you are. And it helps diversify yourself. So, you know, when you don't give us a good description of those particular activities, if you give us just a basic description, it doesn't really paint that picture for me. You know, you really want to give an idea of how whatever activity you've been involved in has impacted you.
I see. Is volunteering overseas considered clinical or volunteering? If it's volunteering in a clinic, I'd say it's both. So it can be both. If you're volunteering as a teacher or as an instructor in a school, that's obviously volunteering. It's not medically related. But if you're volunteering in a medical facility or something that has that focus, I would say that's clinical. Okay, I gave the example of 3.0 cutoff, but Tria says 325. We don't have a definite cutoff, but she is correct. At 3.25, you would not be very competitive. The people in the JAMP program, which is for disadvantaged students, have to meet a 3.25 GPA. So if you're below that and don't have a very high MCAT, now the MCAT can influence how admissions committees look at the GPA. If you don't have a very high MCAT and a 3.0, you would not be very competitive and might not get interviewed. I looked yesterday, and there were about 1,000 people who had less than a 3.3 in our applicant pool, and 41 of them got interviewed somewhere in one of the 11 schools, but only about 10 of them actually got an acceptance. So if you're down between that 3 and 3.25 and don't have a very high MCAT, your chances are not very good. Out-of-state applicants, we start making offers to out-of-state applicants October 15th, just like we do anybody else. If we don't make an early offer to the out-of-state candidate, it may be later on in the process after the match. I'm having trouble figuring out if I'm non-traditional or traditional. I think there will be some clarifying statements in the section of the application that asks for that will help you make that decision. Is that not correct, Latanya? Aren't they coming up with a definition for non-traditional for TMD SAS students?
My computer is messing up. Can someone else answer the question?
The non-traditional, how do you define that? TMD SAS is coming up with a definition, are they not? For the applicant wording? I don't think I was heard. Okay.
I will say, we were supposed to go to 3 o'clock. I don't want to keep those who are visiting much longer. So we were just discussing maybe taking about 5 more questions. We will be back on next week, Thursday from 2 to 3. So if you want to join us again and continue your questions, we will do the same format as today, have a presentation and then give some time for Q&As. So maybe about 5 more questions. It looks like a lot of the questions are the same and kind of very personal to different people asking personal questions. We do have a website. You can, an email. You're more than welcome to send your questions to utmbsomr@utmb.edu. That's the recruitment email. The admissions email. Teresa or Tammy, can you help me with that one?
For the admissions email, SOMADMIS, so only one S, @utmb.edu.
So I will write that in the chat where you can find, if you have more questions there. I don't want to keep you longer, so we're just going to go with maybe about 5 more questions. Let me see, 5 more questions. Let's see if we can find one that looks really good.
Yeah, there is a question about just graduated, haven't been able to take an MCAT. Will they still be considered? The answer will be yes.
We answered the question about pass fail or satisfactory and unsatisfactory grades yet?
I mentioned that we would be accepting them for the fall and for, I think, summer 1.
Okay.
What about a doctorate in another field? That's great. We have lawyers, we have all kinds of people in the class, and a doctorate in any field. We like to see a broad range of life experiences, so that's fine. You don't have to be a science major either. We have fine arts, all kinds of music majors. It doesn't matter as long as you take the prerequisites.
Here's another question that says, can the optional essay be something unique about you, like an interesting hobby, or should it be about a life circumstance?
I think if it's an interesting hobby and it's been an important thing in your life, it's not bad to discuss it. Because not everybody had some huge thing that happened in their life that influenced them that they want to talk about 3 times. So I think anything that really has made you the person you are is something that could be addressed in one of those paragraphs.
And then somebody's also asking, what would like applicants to consider when ranking schools? In our opinion, what does UTMB have uniquely to offer? So I thought maybe you wanted to mention a little bit about our TDCJ hospital.
Yeah, we have a lot of hospitals that we either lease or own. TDCJ, we have a correctional medicine program and the focus of that is the Texas Department of Corrections Hospital that's at UTMB. Inmates from all over this region are brought to that hospital, and it's a unique experience. The other unique experience at UTMB for your clinical experience is the Shrine Burn Hospital for Children. Those are 2 things that you will not find at many, if any, of the other medical schools, probably except maybe for San Houston State, which is right at one of the prisons. But those are probably the most unique, and our curriculum, I think, is unique as well, and the amount of time that you have to use outside of the classroom. So I think there are a lot of unique things, but how you determine fit is just based on your preferences. If you don't like big cities, Galveston is not a big city. If you like to be able to get outdoors year round and enjoy the things that you find in a resort community, we're different than Houston or Dallas or San Antonio, but some people enjoy that. And so it just depends on your personal preferences. But find one that you're comfortable in, because you're going to have a tough 4 years ahead of you. And you want to find some place where you can be comfortable and do your best.
One final question, Dr. Carroll. What activities do you recommend we pursue during the COVID pandemic so that we can still enhance our application?
That is very difficult because we don't even let our students do clinical stuff right now. So, and you really can't do community stuff because you can't do things with large crowds. So I'm not sure I have a good answer for that. Does anybody else have any thoughts?
So we were on a webinar before with the TAP committee, and they were mentioning that there are a lot of online opportunities that their students are taking advantage of. So there's a lot of community service and community outreach websites you can reach out to. So you might want to check your cities for opportunities that they may have. There's also telecommuting. Some doctors are allowing the students to shadow them while they're telecommuting. I mean, telemedicine is going on right now. A lot of their students are just making meals and sending them, or masks, and just walking around their communities and to the neighbors and to anywhere they can actually reach out to the community, any way they can get out. So they're just trying to find different opportunity, I can't think of the word, I'm sorry. Different opportunities to take advantage of while they're locked up in the house. And so just kind of seeking it out. There was a website, I can't think of it right now. I think it was like volunteer.com. And you can find online volunteer opportunities, because we're not the only ones that are looking for some clinical shadowing and volunteer opportunities during this pandemic. So,
yeah. it's going to be difficult, but all of those.
Mhm. I'm trying to think. Do we want to take any more questions?
Are you able to hear me?
Barely, Miss Neely.
Okay.
Yeah, we can. I heard okay, clear.
Okay. I just wanted to also add for plan or activities during this time. There's also opportunities for you to mentor. Virtually. You could also do some tutoring.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You can find some opportunities to do some virtual tutoring as well.
Okay, so thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing lots of applications. We have, you may hear from us. We have your contact information, and we hope that you do well and accomplish your career goal.
Thank you so much. I hope that you all join us next week, Thursday, same time, same place. If you've registered for Thursday next week, then we will send you a new Zoom meeting room for next week on Wednesday, Thursday morning, depending on when you register or if you have, any friends. Next week, we'll be talking about the curriculum at UTMB with Dr. Lisa Elfering, the Assistant Dean for the Medical Students for first and second year. Once again, if you are available, we would love to hear from you. Any questions that you feel that have not been answered, please make sure you check your chat for the websites that you can send them to, email addresses where you can send them to. Thank you so much for joining us. Any last remarks, Ms. Silva?
Oh, just want to tell everyone to please stay safe, and we're looking forward to your applications and your questions.
Yes. Ms. Neely, can you hear us? You good?
I can hear pretty well. I just don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, just want to echo the sentiments that my colleagues have shared, and we look forward to the Q&A section, and we hopefully can try to answer some of those before we sign off.
We missed a chunk of your message, so I don't know if you said when you sign off. I'm not sure what happened between that.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. But once again, if you have any questions, please submit them to the website email addresses. There's a recruitment email address and the admissions. Ms. Bird, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Thank everyone for attending. Thank you also, ladies, and everyone be safe.
All right. Have a good afternoon, all. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.